Hey class, today we are getting an overview of a process in a cell called respiration. This will be Unit 2, Assignment 7. And so we'll be watching an ed puzzle. You'll be answering questions, taking notes, and turning in those notes on Google Classroom. All right, so our question we're exploring today is how do cells use chemical energy? So on Friday, we had a staff meeting and they gave out donuts. Yes! And my favorite donut, this pink sprinkle donut. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And this has a lot of sugar in it. These pink donuts. And the frosting, the sprinkles are just pure sugar. And in the dough itself, too much sugar. But my body does use sugar. It uses the chemical energy trapped inside of the bonds of that sugar. And so today, as we're taking notes, as we're reading text, you're listening to me, you are watching animations, you're looking at models. Your goal is to collect evidence on this question. How do cells use chemical energy? All right, so there's gonna be a demo. So soon this demo is going to pop up. Now, you've watched the demo and you see that sugar contains a lot of energy. And our cells need a way to control that energy because, as you just saw, if that energy was released all at one time, well, our cells would melt and probably get destroyed. And plus, if all that energy was released at one time, once seventh period rolls around and it's been a couple hours since you ate anything, there's no energy left. Your cells just used it. If you used it instantaneously, there's nothing left for your cells to use. So you need a way to take that energy from glucose, from other food molecules, and store that energy to be used in a controlled way. And as we look into that method, we have to keep in mind that when we talk about glucose, glucose is a molecule. Molecules are made of chemical bonds. And so those bonds, when you break a bond, it releases energy. So the example I have in front of you is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And there is this bond here that has a lot of energy in it. So when that energy breaks, when that bond is broken, the energy is released. And so the process we'll be talking about today to control the energy stored in glucose, to break those bonds and release that energy in a controlled way, is called aerobic respiration. And I've circled arrow here because arrow as a root means oxygen. So this is oxygen respiration. And aerobic respiration is the process of producing cellular energy involving oxygen. Arrow, oxygen. And cells break down food or glucose in the mitochondria in a long multi-step process that recharges a lot of ATP and puts the chemical energy in glucose in a form that the cell can use. Now our overall equation for cell respiration is below me. Glucose plus 6 oxygen gas. Those are the reactants. Those are the two molecules needed for this process of aerobic cell respiration. And we go through many different reactions that we'll see an overview of in a moment to produce 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and about 38 of those ATP molecules. Now, I say about 38 because that number changes based off of conditions in the cell and depending on the organism you're looking at. And these two arrows here, these two arrows represent a lot of different reactions. So again, like photosynthesis, in cell respiration, you do not just mix glucose and oxygen together and all of a sudden out comes carbon dioxide and out comes water and out comes ATP. No, there are many different steps that have to happen in an ordered way for us to make these products in our cell. Okay, and the all-star of cell respiration, the all-star molecule is ATP. ATP, I want you to think of it as a battery. And when your battery is fully charged, think about it in your phone or another device, that device contains energy, and that energy can be released. ATP is the same way. So inside of the bonds of ATP, there's this charged chemical energy. And when a cell wants to do something, say it wants to fix the cell membrane, it wants to break down something, it wants to sense something in the outside world, it wants to make something, ATP attaches to it and then pops off one of these P's, which is called a phosphate. So one of these phosphates pop off, and in the process, that energy gets released and helps whatever enzyme or part of a cell that this ATP attached to, it helps it do something. Just like when you would charge your battery and you wanted to use your phone, you could. Or you put batteries in a remote for your Xbox or your PlayStation, and it works, and you're able to do stuff with it. Same way, you take this ATP, you plug it into something, and it helps that thing do something. And what's great about your phone battery is that you can recharge it. You plug it in and you recharge your battery back from the red 1% all the way up to 100%. You can do the same thing with ATP. And that's what cell respiration does. So once ATP gets used in the cell, aerobic cell respiration, that whole process, its end goal is to recharge these ATP batteries. You recharge them so they can go back out in the cell, and they can go back out and power enzymes. They can go out and power all the molecules that the cells use to function. Okay, and this happens in both plant and animal cells. It really happens in all cells. And so if you're a plant, you're an autotroph, you do photosynthesis. What's cool is that you make your glucose and you use your glucose. So you make the molecule that helps you recharge ATP. Animal cells just do respiration. So they have to go out and eat glucose or go out and eat a food molecule so that they can recharge the ATP in their cell. And for both plant and animal cells, aerobic respiration happens in two spots. The first is the cytoplasm, and the cytoplasm is all this space in between all the organelles. So it's a liquidy, chemical-filled space. It's full of proteins and sugars and fats and vitamins and minerals. So it's kind of liquidy, but keep in mind that it's fully saturated with all these different chemicals. And the mitochondria is the second spot of aerobic cell respiration. Okay, that is our organelle. You've probably heard of mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. Really think of mitochondria as a battery recharger. Okay, this is a place where ATP battery molecules get recharged. So our 3 steps in aerobic cell respiration. So there are 3 parts to this. Photosynthesis, we had 2. Cell respiration, we have 3. Step 1 is this process called glycolysis. Step 2 is a Krebs cycle. So like photosynthesis, we have another cycle going on. And finally, step 3 is something called the electron transport chain. All right, so glucose. I would like you at this time to pause the video and read this text, and then unpause when you're ready to go. All right, so glycolysis. Glycolysis is sugar splitting. Glyco means glucose or sugar, and then lysis means to split or break. So glycolysis is a step in the cytoplasm where glucose gets attacked by all these different enzymes. There are 10 different steps where enzymes are tinkering and slowly breaking apart glucose, and you end up with 2 halves of glucose, and we call the 2 halves pyruvate. You made 2 overall ATP, so you recharged 2 ATPs, and you made something called NADH, which is going to get used in the last step in the electron transport chain. So once the pyruvate's made, the halves of glucose, they will get sent into the mitochondria for the last 2 steps of cell respiration. Okay, So I'd like you to, again, pause the video and read this text, and then unpause when you're ready. All right. So our main spots for cell respiration, we have the matrix, the space in the center of the mitochondria. We have two membranes, the outer membrane and the inner membrane. And then we have the inner membrane space. So those are the places where respiration will be happening in the mitochondria. All right, and so step 2 is the Krebs cycle in aerobic cell respiration. So in this step, pyruvate is going to travel inside the matrix, the center part of the mitochondria. So right now I'd like you to pause the video and read the text that's on the screen, and then unpause when you're ready to move on. So the Krebs cycle, it's like this factory assembly line where pyruvate, half of glucose, gets slowly ripped apart in mind of its carbon, and mind of its electrons, and mind of its hydrogen, and mind of its chemical energy. So when we look, glucose will do this twice because pyruvate goes through it one time. So there are two pyruvates and one glucose. So you have two total steps. So as you go through, as the pyruvate goes through the Krebs cycle, okay, think of it as you have these enzymes that are mining pyruvate. So inside of the matrix, this little like cavernous space, think of this, or inside the mitochondria, and this miner is an enzyme. And so when it sees pyruvate, it rips it apart and releases carbon dioxide, and then breaks it apart again and releases electrons and hydrogens that are caught by NADH and FADH2, and then breaks it apart one more time and is going to use that chemical, the broken bonds, to recharge ATP. All right, and so our final step, we are going to the electron transport chain. We're going to the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And from the Krebs cycle, NADH and FADH2 are going to travel there. So again, I would like you to pause the video and read this text, and unpause when you're ready to go. All right. So to break down the electron transport chain, the NADH and FADH2, they are carrying electrons and hydrogen. So those electrons and hydrogen ions, they contain energy. They're very energetic particles. And when NADH and FADH2 go to this inner membrane, there are these proteins that act as little circuits. So the NADH, the FADH2 transfer the hydrogens and the electrons. So as the electrons travel through, they actually help pump those hydrogen ions into this inner membrane space. And so in this space, it's like a dam of hydrogen ions, of positively charged hydrogen ions that then travel through this protein called ATP synthase. And as they travel through, it spins the protein, and that spinning motion actually helps to recharge ATP. All right, so what about oxygen? I spent all this time breaking down how the cytoplasm in the mitochondria breaks apart glucose, captures all that stored chemical energy. And we said at the beginning, aerobic respiration, aero for oxygen. But what about oxygen? So I'd like you now to pause, and I'd like you to read about what oxygen gas does. Okay, so really at the end of the day, oxygen gas is an electron sponge. So if I look at electron transport chain again, all these electrons are flowing through the inner membrane. They're flowing through this protein circuit, pumping out hydrogen ions, helping create this hydrogen ion reservoir that will travel through ATP synthase and recharge ATP. But those electrons, they still have a ton of energy, and they have to be caught somehow. And if they're not caught, they're going to go damage other parts of the cell. And that's what oxygen gas does. It catches electrons. And when it catches those electrons, it turns into H2O. So to summarize aerobic respiration, step 1, glycolysis splits glucose in half to create a little bit of ATP. In the Krebs cycle, pyruvate is broken down into carbon dioxide, and a little bit of ATP is made. And at the final step, the electron transport chain, a lot of ATP is made, and oxygen gas is turned